Well, hello, everybody. Sorry,
that was just kind of creepy.
Was it creepy? I think hello, Julia Child. Oh. Or how about Grover? Hello, everybody.
Oh my gosh, that takes me back when we were studying for our comps. You had to tell them what you did for comps, because I tell you it was the only way I passed comps.
Did we tell the story on the show yet or not?
Did we? I don't think we did.
Let's hold it, because what I could do is I can ask our old pal Notebook LM whether I've already talked about this, and then if we haven't, I'll bring it up next time. How's that?
Okay.
We'll talk.
All right.
Yeah, like you do the Grover. I'm afraid I might just have my puppet come on next, but. We're so excited, though. Let's get to the show. We're excited because today we're going to talk about something that's always fun to talk about, and that's dopey people.
I love talking about dopey people.
I mean, as long as I acknowledge I can be one of them, it's fine, right? I can say dopey because I have dopey friends. Do only dopey folks believe conspiracy theories? No.
No.
You're going to find out today that is not the case, and actually, in some instances, it's the complete opposite. So how can that be? Stay tuned to find out. How you like that? That's a low budget.
That was really, really
not really
good.
For professional talent kind of. Yeah. Just wait till I start doing commercials for sponsors we don't have in my commercial voice. Oh, we should start doing that. I should start making up fake commercials for non-existent products just so we can sound even more professional.
Oh, I like that.
And be like fake products. That's a pretty fun idea.
And then, we might get actually sponsors for real products because they're worried about missing out.
Yeah, or we'll come up with a great idea to make a product.
Ooh.
And then we will become rich, not because of our stupid podcast, because of using our dopey podcast. Anyway, but before we get into this idea that, this common misconception that beliefs in conspiracy theories are really a byproduct of either low intelligence, poor education, or extreme gullibility, in reality, highly intelligent, educated people fall victim to conspiracy theories all the time. And so we're going to talk about that today, but we're super excited. But before we do that, what's going on in your world there, Melissa? It better not be an education conference.
Well, it's kind of education adjacent, because I was at an education conference. But what was really fun is while I was there, I was invited to go to a 4-H gala that recognized some students that were doing great things in 4-H. Remember 4-H? Were you ever a 4-Her?
4 hippies?
Oh my gosh. No, it must be a real thing. Head, heart, hands, and health. I don't know what the sign for health is.
But it's 4 hippies. Yeah.
4 hippies. Oh my gosh. No, 4-H. It was it's a positive youth development program.
I was never a part of that.
You were never a part of 4-H? Okay, well.
You are like the type of person that could have ever gotten into 4-H. I would have had to have shown up for school to go to 4-H.
Okay, fair point. I was a 4-Her.
I think you were. You got that kind of cred.
I did horse. I did gun safety and sharpshooter. I did guns.
Nice.
Guns and horses.
You did guns. Okay, great. That's
I got a chance to reconnect with my 4-H roots by going to this really, really nice gala. And so I'm excited about that. I'm going to start checking out. Apparently 4-H does a lot more things than just farm animals and the county fair. And so I'm excited to learn a little bit more about what they're doing and maybe see what's going on in the Tucson area where I live with 4-H. And so, yeah, I'm pretty excited about that.
Just no audience. My laughter about the 4-H has nothing to do with the actual 4-H itself or the quality of the program. It's about the person we're talking about and the viability that he could have ever gotten into that club. So you go get him, 4-H. I don't think I could have gotten into the 4 hippie club either. So in my world, I'm kind of excited. I like to when you do charitable stuff or voluntarily, you don't talk about it. Like it's great because it just looks like you're. But I'm too excited. Can I share?
Do it. I'd love to know what's going on in your world. Really
I'm excited about it. It's the first thing that I've done. Oh, there's a humble brag because I've been so honored to be able to do lots of charity over the years. Humble brag. That this is one of the one, and granted, some of the charity that I've done over the years have nothing to do with my own charitable spirits because as school district employees, we got volunteered to do quote unquote charity all the time.
Yeah.
So Matter of fact, one of my personal reflections, in all seriousness, this is why this absolutely is not a brag, is the amount of actual giving back that I talked about doing versus doing is pathetic. And so I finally decided it was time to do something about it. I took 3 rounds of interviews, but I have my orientation meeting tomorrow at Phoenix Children's Hospital to be a volunteer.
That's exciting.
So I'll be working there every week, and I'm super excited. I think I'm going to be working in the working with like bedside stuff, but as an educator, I was like, can I read like Grover? I can do that for kids all day long,
yeah.
And so anyway, I'm gonna get to be in the play center. I hope they don't expect me to let those, like, they have like video games in that play center, and if they expect me to let them win just because they're
you're gonna be the one that beats the kids.
Oh yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Please. And plus, guys my size, we don't like to lose in anything.
That's true.
Yeah, Napoleon doesn't like to lose in asteroids. I just dated myself again with asteroids.
You sure did.
Can I give you one other happening though, real fast?
Yeah, love it.
Updates on Phoenix Children's, because I think I'm going to then actually have my first shift in the next couple of weeks. But speaking of asteroids, right here on the corner of downtown Phoenix, did you know that our little Phoenix, that it's really putting on its big boy pants these days? Live music scenes, food scenes, all kinds of stuff happening downtown, gnats everywhere. They are opening the world's first Atari hotel on Central and Roosevelt. There's a big sign. It's an Atari themed hotel. And it's going to, like, the whole front that has giant red, like the A for the Atari A is like the front of the facade of the building. Right. It's going to be like, design's going to be like asteroids and Space Invader.
We are so old that we're excited about that.
Oh, hey, it must not just be us, because they got enough money to put this thing together. Atari is legendary.
Yeah, so, that's true.
And so anything video game related. And just down the street, there's a place that is a retro gaming bar, and it just has lots of 80s and 90s games in it, and it's one of the most popular places in town. So there's always room for the good old-fashioned video games. But I have a hard time finding asteroids, which, in spite of my love for Halo and some other newer games, asteroids will always be my first love, my first crush. And but you can never find that damn game. So I'm going to bet that if they don't have that at the Atari Hotel of all places, I'm going to give up. I'm trying to find it. So I'm excited about that. But now that was the positive. What's stuff in your crawl these days, though?
Well, honestly, and I think it might be the time of year we're starting to gear up. Have you started getting political mail yet?
A little bit.
Yeah.
Not much.
The thing that sticks in my craw is political mail. And there's and we're not anywhere near close to November, but we are getting closer to the primary. And oh my gosh, I'm already starting to get mail. Political mail, like kill trees, political mail drives me insane. It drives me insane. It is not going to change my mind who I'm voting for. And I don't understand why people think that it would. I honestly don't know why we're killing trees to try to change people's minds. Do you?
You damn here. Yeah, there you go. You were part of the 4 hippies. You're upset about the tree killing. You don't really care about the political content.
Fair.
We got you on the trees. No, I mean, it's funny, as someone who, having been a school district administrator, allocated money for the sending of, not as part of my official responsibilities, but as part of the political action committees to send out. Right? Like, we've been on packs where we've had to send out mailers.
Okay, that's a fair point. That's political.
Yeah, but we all sat there knowing it probably wasn't going to make any difference, right?
Does it make a difference? I mean, have you seen statistics about whether or not those things actually make a difference? No?
I've heard that it's one of those, it may move the needle somewhat depending on the issue. The question is, how much do you need your needle moved, right?
Yeah, I guess so.
That sounds inappropriate as well, by the way.
It kind of does.
Yeah, but in today's world where it feels like everything's 4951, right? It probably, like, it's that name recognition thing. And it's funny you say that, because you actually just made me divert my crawl.
Oh, do tell.
This will be 3 episodes in a row without a gym complaint, by the way. It's that related too. I was thinking to myself the other day, I cannot handle another election season, right? Matter of fact,
did we ever leave the election season?
Huh?
Did we ever leave election season?
No, it's never stopped.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, because the signs have started going up on the corners.
Mm-hmm. They sure have.
And to me, it's just vandalism, number one. And if you vote for somebody because you saw their name written on a sign on a corner, you should lose your voting rights. Like, it's just, and it must work, right? Because it just sends a message that this person has enough connection to have money. Somehow it works because people spend a fortune on it. It must work. And TV ads, which everybody makes fun of, they somehow, they work in one way, shape, or form. But I was telling my wife, I said, I really would prefer, starting right now, to just turn off the TV from now until December, because I can't deal with those commercials. And granted, a lot of what we watch is now streamers, so I don't get that kind of, advertisement. But the thing that's got me held hostage is I'm a sports fan, and I can't. You can't get away from broadcast television if you are a sports fan. Yeah. So the only way around it is to I use YouTube TV and I just fast forward through a commercial. It's the only way to avoid it. But if you try to watch any kind of just regular nightly news or anything, you just can't get away from it. It's just, and the thing is, it's all garbage on both sides. It's all flat made up. Yeah. Right. There's stuff being made up, and they're using
there's hyperbole involved. The other thing that we're getting is other states have elections, and we're getting their political ads too. I haven't gotten any mailings yet, but certainly some of the things that are happening in Texas or California or New York, we know about them because we're getting their political stuff too. So it's not just Arizona.
Some of that is also laying groundwork for introducing legislation in Arizona, right? So, like what's the old adage about Arizona being a mini Florida? So keep an eye on Florida, because what's happened there is going to happen here next, kind of thing. So it's one of those things where you're damned if you do and damned if you don't. If you pay attention, you're screwed. If you don't pay attention, you're screwed. So it really puts me in a bind. So instead, I just go to concerts and I still unfortunately pay attention, but I'm trying to partition off my attention paying. So, as speaking of concerts,
I would love to see it. What do we got?
This band, I know it looks like I'm in some sort of demonic cult, doesn't it?
Yes.
It's called the Clan of Zymox. They are, I guarantee you've never heard of them.
I have not heard of them. You would be correct, sir. I have not heard of them.
They're from the Netherlands. Okay. They are, their music genre would be considered like dark wave. So kind of like, remember Joy Division? New Order?
I've heard of them.
New Order, right. So New Order, Joy Division, that kind of synth, got a little bit darker, kind of sad. And I actually got to see them come through here not too long ago, put on a great show down at Last Exit Live, and really enjoyed it. And I hadn't really actually listened to them very much, even though that was my kind of part of my taste in music, especially when they were popular. And they kind of escaped me, and I started listening to them because they were coming, and I'm like, these guys are really good. And then this is the way it happens. I love it. This is how you find new music. The band that opened for them, I'd never heard of them. I think I might have even worn a shirt of theirs, Matt Black, from one of our recent episodes. Yeah, I'd never heard of them, but they opened for this band. That's why I was there. And I was like, these guys are amazing. And now I have another band that I love. I don't listen to these guys nearly as much as I do them. But that's how you get infected with great new stuff. So awesome. So, hey, let's talk about conspiracy theories.
I love a good conspiracy theory.
Conspiracy theories. This allows me to, if I do the Hercules thing, then it allows me to squash this gnat that keeps flying in my face and have a good reason for doing it.
Okay.
Hercules. So anyway, either that or you think I'm just having some sort of a spasm.
Mike, it could be anything.
So guess what? It's not as simple as only dopey people believe.
It never is as simple as we want to believe it is.
No. Guess what? Guess where this all starts?
I would love for you to take us back to one of our favorite books, Daniel Kahneman, and Thinking Fast and Slow, and talk to us a little bit about how System 1 and System 2 thinking might have some kind of foundational basis in what we're going to be talking about.
Yeah, I'm going to blow through it kind of quick, because if you've listened to us, and hopefully you have, you've probably gotten, oh God, don't spend too much time on this. But reminder, System 1 are those things that are intuitive, automatic. You don't have to think about them. The System 2 are the reason. You're slowed down. You're actually processing some sort of information, some sort of data, and you're making some sort of a decision based on inputs that are you're conscious of. Mm-hmm. Again, Jonathan Haidt likes to use the elephant and a rider, an elephant and a rider, and the elephant is system 1 and the rider is system 2. The elephant already knows which way it's going. The job of the rider is to believe that he chose the direction of the elephant, kind of thing, right? And so, but what the rider actually ends up being is the PR agent for the elephant. Well, of course we turned left, and here's why, right? And so if you are debating someone on gun control or immigration policy, or you name anything that people like to argue about, whether a team should change their mascot name, the elephant has already made its turn. The rider, right, depending on pre-existing conditions, the rider then is looking for reasons for why they got there. How did I get here? How did I come down on the side of, pro-gun control or anti-gun control, or how did I get here? Oh, this reason, and that's the reason, and that's the reason. Now I'm going to do it. I'm going to justify it. Now, a higher in IQ is what we're going to talk about a little bit today. Is IQ is very much too simplified to have this conversation around as a concept. But the idea of an IQ or a high IQ or just a high intellect or even just high verbal skills just means that you have a better PR firm for the decisions that you've made, right? So another person who's done some work on this, a lot of work on it, is someone by the name of Michael Shermer. He's pretty much a famous skeptic. He's kind of like, I wouldn't want to invite him to a party because he'd be a real downer. You couldn't talk about the X-Files or, anything that would be, well, what if? No, that's not, here's why, he's just one of those types of people. Notorious, like a wet blanket, I think, notorious. But he's done a lot of research on conspiracy theories in particular. And he talks about the fact that our brains are evolutionarily, they're survival machines. And they were also, we've talked about it being wired to save energy, right?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
One of the ways you can save energy is to find patternicity, right? That's not a Police album. That was synchronicity. Find patterns in meaningless noise, right? So if I can find something, if I can do some sense making, right, in this noise, then I can explain what's going on. And also, it looks to put agenticity in it, like looking for agency. So not only am I looking for patterns, I'm trying to infuse those patterns with intention, right? Or agency, right? So finding a pattern, and then I'm also explaining the pattern, right? The brain is wired to do that. If you want to learn more, dig into how they've researched this, how they've looked into it. Hercules. Sorry. Nat, if you're not watching the video. These aren't intellectual flaws, right? These are what we're wired to do. Mm-hmm. And like in our last episode, we talked about it's not good or bad. It just is. It can be detrimental or it can be helpful, depending, right, on the circumstance. And being aware of those things is really, really important. So these are primal mechanisms. There's nothing you do about it, right, other than try to head off some of those kind of primal intuitions. There is also this concept of an amygdala hijack. I always struggle with that word, the amygdala. I don't know why it gives me trouble. But when we feel out of control, like during a pandemic or a political upheaval or a post-earthquake or natural disasters, right, those kinds of things, the amygdala part of the brain seeks it looks for certainty, trying to find an anchor to. And what's great about a conspiracy theory is it fits that mold. Conspiracy theories offer really neat, ordered explanations for chaos, because we don't like the answer when we say, well, why would this happen? Well, because, that's not good enough.
Right.
Brain does not like because, it doesn't like open-ended, or why not? Why did it happen? Well, why wouldn't it happen? Is just as valid. Why would there be an earthquake here today? Well, there had to be an earthquake somewhere at some point. Why not today? Why not here? That kind of thing.
Yep.
The brain doesn't like that. And so once the amygdala locks into this kind of comforting certainty, the prefrontal cortex part of our brain uses its intelligence to build a fortress around it and protect it. Okay, this is what happened and this is why it happened. And now I'm going to build a wall around this belief right? About this conspiracy theory. And what we're talking about today, we're talking about conspiracy theories, but you can see the connections to other things. It's not just conspiracy theories. It's human nature and other areas of our lives. So, I'm sure that as you're hearing this, you can think of things that were like major, chaos causers in our world that spawned tons of conspiracy theories.
Oh my gosh. The one that comes to mind right away as an educator is the pandemic. I mean, when we were all operating within COVID, there were all kinds of conspiracy theories about where did it come from and who knew about it and how did it spread to the United States? And, was it the Wuhan meat market or, all kinds of crazy things.
Right. Or even more nefarious than that, right? Like, well, somebody deliberately let this out, or the government is telling us there's a pandemic. It's not really happening,
right.
And those probably fall more into the type of, we're going to kind of explore, those kinds of, there's a motivator behind the conspiracy, right? There's different types. And you're absolutely right. The idea that we look for meaning, we have to know now, right? So some of these things are the know nows could be true. Right. So could it be true that it came out of the Wuhan meat market? Yes, it absolutely could be. But we don't know that yet. Right. Yep. But because we want to know, and we want to know now.
We're not happy with waiting.
No, we're not going to wait. Right. We're going to choose to say, no, this is where it happened. And if you won't agree, then you're just in denial. Right. And so that's it. But then there's the next layer. And then if you go back to think about 9/11. Right?
Oh my gosh.
That was earth-shattering for all of us. Like our generation had mostly been impermeable to attack. We'd never felt the feeling of what does it feel like to be as a nation under attack. And I remember that morning thinking, we were actually under attack.
Yep.
I never knew this feeling. It was very unsettling, right? But what happened after 9/11? And you can go on and find them now. Just go look up the conspiracy. Well, don't look them up because you go down those rabbit holes before you might believe them, but not you. I know you would. But very smart sounding conspiracies.
Yes.
About, the Bush administration knew about this. They let it happen, which was very similar to what? Pearl Harbor, right? Oh, the FDR, right. They knew about this. They wanted an excuse to go to the war, blah, 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 blah. Again, these are all things that actually make sense as a story. But there's also other stories that make a lot of sense, like a handful of terrorists flew 2 planes into a building and we just were unprepared.
Right.
Right. And so the idea that actually the simplest solution is usually the correct one comes into play here. Right. So we can go back through history over and over. There has been lots of studies in like areas where there's been major natural disasters, tsunamis, earthquakes, the surge in religiosity. Right. And I'm not attacking anybody's, but it's that looking for meaning, looking for, why did this happen? How did it happen? How can we survive it? How can we? And I think, the religiosity piece actually may serve as a positive for people. Like, so this isn't about good or bad. Right. It's just understanding what is happening. What's really interesting here is there's this concept of proportionality bias. That it's this cognitive bias that we have that assumes that significant world-changing events must have equally monumental causes, right? So a highly intelligent person might reject that a lone disorganized gunman could alter history, right, by assassinating John F. Kennedy, or that some, microscopic mundane virus could shut down the whole world. A smart person can use their intellect to weave a massive, intricate plot that feels proportionate to the damage that's been done, so to speak.
Yeah.
Right. The irony is that the more complicated the plot gets, the less likely it is that it actually occurred. Because you know what they say is that you tell a secret is something you can tell one other person. You can't tell 2 people, right?
That's right.
The idea that tens of thousands of people were involved in orchestrating and that they could keep their mouths shut, number one, right? Like, so the more complex it becomes, the more people know about it, the odds that anybody's so it just becomes less likely the more complex it gets anyway. And so it just doesn't make sense to just go, come on, you can't believe one guy shot JFK. Well, I don't. And am I saying with absolute definitive, do I know? Could it be possible? There's a lot, we use the JFK one. There's a lot of smoke around JFK. Right. There's a lot of that is a little weird, and that is a little right.
Yep.
And I'm for one, am one that's saying like, look, if I had to say I'll deal in probabilities. And I think that's always the safest. What's the probability that JFK was just killed by the lone gunman, right? Lee Harvey Oswald.
Probably not high.
Yeah. I mean, I put it as reasonable.
It
right?
might be reasonable.
And then when you start adding on other details, like, yes, he visited Russia and had communist connections, but it also does fit a story of a person who wanted to fit in, wanted to be somebody, wanted to do something, and got a couple good shots in, and it just happened, right? Like, but is it possible that there was something else involved? Yeah, but then that's when the story gets even more crazy. Does it have to be that it was the American government involved? Then all of a sudden it's LBJ was involved. Maybe the next layer out was just the mafia wasn't happy with the Kennedy family and they were involved,
yep.
right? And that's it. The government didn't know about it. We don't, and that's the thing. It's okay to say, I don't know for sure, right? But I'm not going to run around and go to every Christmas party saying, come on, you can't tell me you actually think JFK was killed by Lee
There are
Harvey.
people that do that though, Mike.
I know
there are
do.
people that do that. And you have to, you got to give them a little bit of slack, because some of the data points that you talk about agenticity, some of the data points that they're pulling together to try to weave this understanding of an event or a circumstance or whatever, I could see how they're pulling those things together.
Oh, sure.
And so that's where those conspiracy theories start kind of snowballing and getting out of your thought process into other people's, and then they start getting a life of their own. And so I'm interested to know what else you got as far as why that might be happening.
This way. Possible doesn't mean likely, right? And that's
Fair
what people
point.
always have to tell themselves. It's possible that this could have happened, this intricate web of stuff, but does it make it likely? And how likely, right, is what we always have to kind of ask ourselves. So a few more things, under the hood before we get into a little bit more. But the first one is, I mentioned a little bit about, IQ and all that kind of stuff. It's more complicated than that, right? Like, we've got this interesting research around, raw IQ, which has always been controversial anyway. Like, we all know the smart guy with 160 IQ that can't tie his shoes stories, right? Like, some of which I think are just made up by low IQ people, but I don't know. There's this idea of actively open-minded thinking that's being talked about now, which is just the willingness to consider alternative opinions, postpone closure, which is what we've been talking about for a couple episodes.
Yep.
So a person can have a genius level IQ, but a score very low on their AOT, which makes them very highly susceptible to rigid conspiratorial thinking. Right. So you can be super smart and be able to design a rocket, but because you're really eager to put a bow on everything, because your actively open-minded thinking quotient score, whatever they want to call it, isn't as high, it mutes. I just got splat out attacked by that gnat. They are just like, we're going to call this the assault episode. I mentioned Pearl Harbor earlier. I seriously just got dive bombed. So this might be a conspiracy now. Right? These might be little. So I'll make a conspiracy up on the spot. This is the administration. These are micro drones. They're trying to shut me up.
Whoa.
It's going to into a trailer into the Las Vegas desert to start broadcasting by shortwave radio. I'm telling you. So, so anyway, you can see how easily you can make one of these up. It's pretty fun. So then, that dive bomb really threw me for a loop. So anyway, you can be somebody that can design a rocket, but you can't get out of your own way when it comes to thinking through other things. And then the other thing that is really interesting is there's this kind of concept of the but fortress. And it's this idea that conspiracists will rarely deny undeniable facts outright. Instead, they kind of compartmentalize them. We'll talk about that a little bit more later, which means you kind of construct a secondary and tertiary hypothesis to explain away inconvenient data, right? Creating an impenetrable wall of, that's true, but, right? But if you looked at their earlier argument, and if that data wasn't a part of it, they still don't account for it, right? So it invalidated their earlier argument, so it's just a goalpost move. And the irony is we're doing this episode and we're literally not going to change a single person's mind. The whole world could listen to this episode and no one's going to change their mind. The only good thing we could do here is if people recognize this and it helps them in the future, right? So, for example, if you have a political opinion and all of a sudden something you see this, you want to see this in action every single day for the right and the left, go on X, go on Twitter, go on X, whatever you want to call it. And you will see people and it's pretty prevalent right now in left-wing circles in Twitter, of the slightest little thing that comes out that looks like it could be connected to this to connected to that, becomes breaking, Trump administration linked to this, and then you dig a little bit. It's like, no, this is just one of those things they wanted to believe, right? You didn't do your homework. You wanted to believe it. Now you're connecting dots. And unfortunately, you've got 25,000 followers and they're all sharing it, liking it without questioning it.
Right.
So our hope is that you get to think like, look, for example, if you don't like the current administration and then you stumble upon a conspiracy theory, that you use the same intellectual rigor to determine how valid this claim might be before you just go for it, right? Because it fits your kind of predetermined, your predetermined belief, right? So it's just, I don't know. You probably see a lot of that too in the social media world, because I know I sure have.
Well, I think I told you recently that I have started doom scrolling, and it's not a good thing.
Don't do it.
Don't do it. Because you're right. You can get sucked down the rabbit hole of intellectual arrogance, intellectual arguments, not even smart arguments. I mean, it doesn't have to necessarily be an intelligent conversation starter. But yeah, it's just, it's all over the place. And if you're not thinking that doesn't make any sense. Or I think I need a little bit more information before I make up my mind. You could get really very easily sucked into kind of a death spiral of thought and not be able to get out of it.
Right, you can, and the excuse we use to go down that path is it feels right.
Yeah.
Right. So the elephant is driving again. Like if you hate the current administration, and you see this earth-shattering conspiracy theory online, it feels good, and people need to admit it feels good, because you're thinking, oh, there's the bullet, there's the magic bullet that puts all this together. I'm not advocating violence.
Now I don't have to think about it anymore. Somebody has figured it out and solved the problem. I'm done.
Right. And so somebody who's not a fan of the current administration might say it couldn't possibly be that just the voting population voted for this person. It has to be that, right, that something else was going on, and it turns out this, and this, and this, and this, right? Now, this is an example where you do have to use your intellect. You don't just dismiss everything, right? So, for example, we'll stay in the political space. After Trump won in 2020, right, it was everywhere that the Russians tried to influence the election on behalf.
Didn't win in 2020.
I'm sorry. 2016. Thank you. Good correction. 2016. Well, that's a whole nother conspiracy theory. Good call.
Yes,
I've heard number too frequently. But so 2016, you heard everywhere about how the Russians had tried to put their finger on the scale for Trump and worked against Hillary Clinton. Sounds like a conspiracy theory on the surface, right? I think it was 21 intelligence agencies, more than 20, had the same opinion.
Yep.
That they were leaning into social media. Now, an intelligent person who is not just intelligent, but is also curious to find out whether there's validity here, not just trying to find out whether it supports their current belief system, would say, okay, I've got an accusation essentially of a foreign influence that would explain how this guy got elected, right? But the evidence actually, that is evidence, 21, and I don't, even though people on the other side dismiss the fact that every intelligence agency said it happened, everyone knows that Russia has bots that are feeding Twitter. Everyone knows, that there are advantages. There were advantages for certain countries, for certain presidents versus others. It's just the way it is. We all know that, right? So it's not really as earth-shattering of an announcement anyway, as if you pay attention to the politics. We already know that countries are trying to influence elections to some degree, but Russia gone to this next level with this army of bots on Twitter, etc. And again, so I have hard evidence, 21 agencies. What are the odds that 21 agencies are part of some vast conspiracy? The smear, not good. I don't care how it makes you feel. The odds are not good.
Right. Too many moving parts. Really.
Right. And the agencies are clearly unrelated to each other, don't even talk to each other half the time, which is a problem. Right. And so, so that's number one. And then, but then number two is, so we have reason to believe that Russia tried to influence. However, where a left-leaning person or a Hillary voter might want to look for more connection is from there on, right? So what that really tells us is, guess what? They just amplified misinformation, but ultimately American voters still decided, they still just digested this information and they went and pulled the lever, right? Yep. So you can ask yourself, is that election, is that them flipping an election, which would be like voting machines and like, or is that them flooding the zone with misinformation, which is actually part of what goes on in every election cycle, right? Like, doesn't make it okay. It's unethical. We'd like American voters to be smarter than that. It's just not how it works, right?
Yeah.
But the conspiracy, it turned out, appears to have ended there, right? However, for years in left-wing circles on social media, there was all kinds of, I have a contact who knows someone at Deutsche Bank who said there's a computer connected to a computer in Trump Tower that's blah, 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 blah. And it was just one kind of extravagant story after another, right? Where these conspiracies got more and more kind of out there, and people who normally don't talk that kind of language were amplifying it on that space, right? So you had roots of a true conspiracy, but then blown completely out of proportion into something that it wasn't, right? And so as long as someone goes into their situation and says, look, I'm going to be predisposed to believe this. Now I have to be a real pain in my own ass trying to figure out if there's any truth to this, right? And don't try to prove it right, try to prove it wrong, right? So the title of the episode, though, is about smart people. So I want to focus a little bit more on that. Part of the problem is, and just to summarize, the data shows that you have a high likelihood, just like everyone else, of subscribing to unsubstantiated conspiracy theories, regardless of your education or your intellect, right? And the reason for that is fascinating. There's been plenty of work on it. You probably don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure it out, right? The first one is, smart, educated people have this illusion of explanatory depth, right? That smart, educated people often fall victim to this assumption that because they understand one complex system, for example, very deeply, so like science or law or philosophy or you name it, like something, they inherently understand all things that are complex, right? All complex systems. So global geopolitics, global business, biomechanics, right? Like because I'm smart and I know this field, I must be smart everywhere, right? And I think we all know that if you really, I always think that it would be great for every person, especially people who have an education, to go take some classes in a field they know nothing about. You want to get knocked back a few rungs.
Yep.
Go take an international business supply chain course, and you'll realize, okay, I'm super smart and great at what I do, but there's a lot more out there than what I do. There's another thing that's interesting is you'd think that information leads to objective truth, right? The more information, the more truth we should get to, right?
You would think.
No, and that's not true based on what's happened with social media, but research is showing that highly politically engaged, highly educated citizens are just often even more polarized than quote unquote regular people. And it's because their high intelligence allows them to scan through massive amounts of information, of data, and cherry pick only specific things that support their arguments.
Yeah.
And not nefariously, not cognitively, right? But I'm smart. I can cover a bunch of stuff. I go, oh, that fits. I'm pulling, right? And I'm making this collage out of things, and I can cover a lot more content, right? And it's a skill that somebody that has a quote unquote high intellect has access to.
Well, and I think honestly, with the amount of information that we are bombarded with every day, even people that are of average intellect might feel like they are scanning a lot of information too, and are also cherry picking. Part of it might be algorithm, but you know, we do have so much data at our fingertips at any given point in time, whether it's around politics or it's around religion or it's around, you name the topic, that, you know, aliens, and, you know, probes, wherever those probes might be. And
or where they ended up.
Yeah, right. And picking the things that make the most sense. This is something that, you know, I would worry about as an intellectual. I like to consider myself someone that's well read and understands a lot of things about a lot of things. I would be worried about this if I wasn't paying attention and really digesting information in a way that was critical of what it was that I was thinking about and reading.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it doesn't mean, you know, one of the real problems that we've run into is, yes, there's a lot of information out there, but it depends on how you define the word information. Right.
Good point.
What is likely to be fact and what is speculation? What is sensationalism? And this idea that we need to give equal time to quote unquote the other side, as if they both stand on the same pillars, right, of probability is really part of how we've gotten into this problem.
Good point.
And one of the bones I've always had to pick with like the CNNs of the world, everybody that sees them as the, you know, nonpartisan.
Or the center.
I disagree, because when you take, you know, because their number one goal is to create an argument on television. That's their goal. Sure. That's their bread and butter. That's the money maker. Having two people generally agree might belong on a Sunday morning news program where only hardcore politicos tune in, right? Right. You watch the car if you want to see smart people talk wisely who might disagree on some things and but not others. Sunday morning shows, that's what they're for. Reason, smart, disagreements, you know, some agreement, some disagreement, but that's not entertaining. That's why they're on Sunday morning. So CNN will put an astrophysicist whose entire life is spent to the mathematics and the physics and the study of blah, 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 across conspiracy theorists, right? And, you know, and I think we talked about this in did the History Channel ruin, right? Well, could it be, right? And so, and the idea that it's not that they both don't have value. I'm not here to try to pretend. I know people will point and say, well, you're an intellectual snob. Who's to say he doesn't? I'm not saying he doesn't. But the likelihood is what I'm talking about. Right. It's always all about probability. And if the likelihood that the astrophysicists on one side of the panel versus crazy hair guy from the History Channel, right, who just has interviewed a bunch of people who thinks they were abducted, which again, could he be onto something? Maybe. I would never say that he's wrong, right? I will say he's making a lot of money off of his shit, but may not be wrong. We don't know. Right.
I think that's the whole point.
Yeah, that's the whole point. We do not know. Yeah. But there are some things where the evidence is so overwhelming in one direction, right, that you have to start saying, I don't know for sure, but I'm reasonably confident that this is what did or didn't happen. Lastly, just to summarize this idea about the smart person, what ends up happening with smart people and why this happens, if just to summarize it, is that they are very good at playing the mental gymnastics that are required to hold position, right? As Russell Crowe screamed at the beginning of Gladiator, hold the line, right? Your brain's number one job is when it feels like it's being questioned, it's yelling. Russell Crowe is running around inside your brain yelling, hold the line, right? Whatever you do, do not.
Hold the door.
Don't hit. No, hold door. Yeah, hold door. Don't let them gain an inch on this debate, right? And a person who is smart, well-read, a complex thinker, a articulate speaker can move a goalpost like you wouldn't believe it.
It's true.
And the thing is that you'll never pin them down. It's literally impossible. And that's why I say it's really, really difficult to kind of deprogram a conspiracy theory. Your best bet is to try to head off future ones, and just, keep going. But there's going to be that tug where you're going to go, but this just feels like, that's just, what are the odds? Well, right. We're going to do another episode on probability down the line. Right. And then we're going to talk about the idea. Well, the odds that something really crazy, a 1 in a million thing was going to happen, the odds are actually good that something is going to happen. We just didn't predict it in advance. And that's a whole nother conversation. So just as a quick example, I thought it'd be kind of fun for you and I to do like let's use the moon landing.
Okay.
Example. This is an example, and for those of you who don't know, there are still a lot of people out there that think the moon landing was fake, right? And we're not here to make fun of people who think the moon landing was fake. There are some very intelligent arguments to be made, but they all end up in dead ends if you stick with each thread, right? And again, the probability ends up being very low that it was faked, even though you might be able to raise a noodle of this or a question about that. Mm-hmm. I don't know where I came up with that expression. But so the mainstream point is that the understanding in society is that the Apollo moon landings are an established historical fact, right? Like we taught it in school. We have several hundred kilograms of moon rocks that display unique isotropic signatures, right? That you can't even get on Earth. Mm-hmm. You've got astronauts that left retroreflectors on the lunar surface
and flags,
and the flag, and independent observatories around the world. They're still bouncing things off of those reflectors, and not to mention telescopic observations, et cetera, et cetera. But a conspiracy theorist might take that established fact, and I'll let you play the part there. You want to
share
the conspiracy theorist?
You could say, if you were a conspiracy theorist, that those observatories that were bouncing lasers off the moon were ignoring the fact that the Soviet Luna program proved that retroreflectors can be deployed by unmanned probes. And as for those isotopic signatures on rocks, if you look at the timeline in 1967, right, there was a gentleman named Werner von Braun. Von Braun. That person, he led an expedition to Antarctica, and that's a famous region for preserving lunar meteorites. So potentially, NASA could have taken one of those and passed them off as a moon rock.
That's so clever. Okay, so as we can see, the web of people that would have to be involved in this is growing.
Yes, it's true.
Conspiracy.
You'd have a lot of people.
And my first response was I wanted to do what Dan Aykroyd used to do on, wasn't it Dan Aykroyd that you'd say on Saturday Night Live, "Oh, Jane, you ignorant slut." Yes. But I figured that'd be inappropriate. Good call. But the rebuttal from the scientific community or the logic-based community would be, but lunar meteorites found on Earth have atmospheric burn crusts and earthly water contamination. The Apollo rocks show microscopic impact craters from micrometeorites, something that can only happen in the vacuum of space, and you can't really fake that.
So, right? And then I would say, in counterpoint to that, you're getting lost in geology when you should be looking at physics, because the Apollo command module's shielding was essentially a few millimeters of aluminum, and that's woefully inadequate to block the proton flux. Sounds like something out of, Star Trek. The proton flux of the Van Allen radiation belts during a translunar injection orbit. I don't even know what that means, but it would be inadequate to block those proton fluxes. And the math for biological survival it doesn't work, which is why the raw telemetry data that would prove that their exact trajectory was famously lost by NASA.
So the counterpoint to that, right, it would be that the transit through the Van Allen belts, as everyone knows, was rapid, actively avoiding the highest intensity regions, the equivalent of radiation of a single chest X-ray. Furthermore, the telemetry and trajectory were tracked by independent and global observatories, including the Soviets. During the height of the Cold War, the USSR had every political motivation to expose a U.S. fraud, yet they confirmed that it happened.
And I'm going to say the Soviets were bought off. The Nixon administration arranged massive, highly subsidized wheat deals to the USSR in the early 1970s to keep them quiet. And it was a mutually beneficial geopolitical cover-up.
So we're going to end our little simulation here, but I'm going to hit on a few things that occurred in that conversation. If you've ever had a debate with someone who's into this kind of stuff, this probably actually sounded very familiar. And I've had similar conversations to the ones we've just had. And part of what these conspiracy theories rely on is we prepared for this conversation. It allowed me to do the research to make sure I had what I needed in terms of the science, in terms of like what would a real scientist say to these questions. But if you're at a dinner party and you're not a scientist, you don't have all this. So eventually, the jargon, which I'm going to talk about here in a second, her weaponized jargon, as we like to call it, it became something that can't really be overcome by a regular person, right? And so they end up walking away saying, well, I won that debate. See, no one could. Well, it's because we also do. If I had some NASA scientists in the room, I'm pretty sure this conversation would have ended differently. But anyway, so here's kind of what was going on. Her logic had gone off the rails. First is what I mentioned was the weaponized jargon. And if you notice, she was injecting highly technical terms, isotropic signatures.
Which I didn't even understand.
I don't know what they meant. Translunar injection and telemetry. She uses her intelligence to create an aura of unassailable expertise, right? So she's able to use these words in a believable way. She might even know what they mean. She can recall them. She's listened to a radio program where they've talked about it over and over.
Or a podcast like this one.
Or a podcast, right? And the more you hear of this argument, the more it becomes part of your argument, right? So a conspiracy theory person usually is fed this content from somewhere, obviously. And they usually come from similar sources, related sources, that kind of thing. And it sounds like a peer-reviewed paper. She sounds like a walking peer-reviewed paper. And it's intimidating the average person. Like, she walks into the room, starts talking like that. The average person is going to go, oh, really? Wow. Okay. Well, I didn't know all that. I'm going to go home and look it up. And then they find out, it turns out we didn't land on the moon, right? You just never know. So that's one thing, is weaponized jargon. So look out for someone who, when they try to defend their belief in the conspiracy theory by starting to drop, well, haven't you heard of the translunar trajectory? Blah, 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 blah. That's strategy number one for defending the conspiracy theory. There's also some classic moving of the goalpost, right? When confronted with hard physical evidence, the vacuum sealed micrometeorite impacts on the rocks, she just argued that we should abandon the geology argument, actually accused me of, you're focused on geology when you should be focusing on physics. But what she was doing is pivoting away from a point that she actually had already been in the geology space. She's the one that was saying rocks from the Antarctic have been used, right, to look like they came from the moon. So the conversation got brought to geology by the conspiracy theorist. Then when you address the geology side of it, she goes, well, you shouldn't be talking about the geology. You should be talking about the physics. And then she moved on to, Allen belts and radiation, all the rest of it, but never had to answer for the micrometeorite, counters and that sort of thing. There also was another very common strategy. And when I say strategy, these aren't things that a person thinks up in advance. These are things that they do almost naturally, right? Because they are smart. And if they're a lawyer in real life, they use these same skills to argue for their defendant or client in court, right? So these are skills that are useful and particularly, available to people who have high interpersonal skills, high communication skills, high intelligence, that sort of thing. Another thing that happens is cherry picking of anomalies, right? She hyper focuses on specific out of context engineering anomalies like the radiation shielding thickness, but while completely ignoring kind of the bigger reality, which is pretty much the sheer impossibility of having hundreds of thousands of scientists, engineers, and contractors that were involved in all this basically have to be involved in this conspiracy theory, and it never got out, right? And so, which just kind of undermines like, okay, so you found one little thing that maybe you haven't found a satisfactory answer to, or could just be an anomaly. Sometimes weird things just happen, right? There's a percentage chance in any situation that anything can happen.
Sure.
Right? Maybe there was an error and they survived it, right? Sometimes the O-ring holds and the spaceship doesn't blow up, and sometimes it doesn't hold and it does blow up, right? Yeah. So it can be an anomaly, even that just still hasn't quite been explained. But it doesn't change the fact that there's all this other stuff out there in the ethos that is validated, right? And so to hold on to that one little thing. And then lastly, there was definitely some of the classic circular logic and kind of infinite expansion, to maintain the belief the conspiracy must constantly expand, right? Because the landing must be fake. The rocks must be meteorites. When the Soviets are brought up, the conspiracy expands to include international geopolitical economic payoffs, right? The wheat transfers, the Nixon administration. The intellect acts as a bodyguard at endlessly manufacturing yeah buts to protect the core belief, right? So by expanding it and making it broader, I give myself more places to plant my new goalposts.
Yep.
And also, it's really hard to chase me around and pin me down, because now it's like, oh God, now there's another administration involved. Now there's wheat deals. Now so now the person trying to counter these is chasing, right? It's like playing whack-a-mole at Chuck E. Cheese. It's like you can't pin them down. So point being is that when you think about conspiracy theories and you think about things out there that have not been proven, or that there's still a lot of questions about, and there are some doozies out there. I actually love them. I'll watch all those shows. I get a kick out of watching them, because there is that part of me that, like I said, I deal in probabilities most of the time, and sometimes that 5% or 10% chance, it's still a chance, and it's fun to think of. I love to think about the fact, is there a giant dinosaur swimming around out in Loch Ness? The odds are pretty slim, but God, wouldn't it be cool if it was? It'd
be so cool if Nessie actually lived.
It would be amazing, right? And so, and it doesn't mean that it isn't true. It just means it's highly unlikely. And if you go looking for things to prove that Nessie exists, you will find them.
Yeah, or Bigfoot.
Yeah, or Bigfoot, or I found him in the $6 Million Man. We talked about that in the last episode, remember? So some of these things may still someday turn out to be something that been floating around as a conspiracy theory, where you just look and say, because I kind of like to think of them as, which ones are possible? There is some weird stuff around, going back to the Kennedy thing, the intersection of the mafia, the Cuba, the amount of assassinations that all occurred at the same time, roughly the same time period. The fact that you had, FBI and some weird stuff that we know was going on. It was pretty weird. But at the same time, anytime you raise the temperature and have all this stuff going on at the same time, all it takes is one explosion can kind of cause multiple blowups, and then maybe they weren't originally connected, but then they eventually kind of become part of the story. So you just don't know. And maybe someday we will. And it's fun to think about, but in reality, it's important to go into every one of these. And my challenge to every listener would be, know thyself, right? If you're politically leaning one way, or if you're a person who is a skeptic about, medical procedures, or know that when you engage with these sort of it's not just conspiracy theories, but it's conspiratorial thinking, right? Know that there might be some truth, right? So, for example, there's a lot of talk, and this will be the last thought. There's a lot of talk about the Make America Healthy movement, right? Mm-hmm. And the unfortunate part about the whole thing is there is some legitimate science-backed assertions coming out of the RFK's office, right? The role of healthy eating, right? The role of junk food, the role of he's bringing stuff up that is actually spot on, that's well documented in the science. There's also some real questions about the role of food producers and pharmaceutical companies, and they are always kind of lurking around the edges, and they have high-powered lobbyists, and there have been some sweetheart deals in terms of subsidies for corn and all that, right? Like those are all true.
They are.
And it may be true that some policy has been negatively influenced because of these things, but it doesn't mean that all policy and all government and everything they've ever told you is wrong. And now because it turns out they were hiding the negative effect of, high fructose corn syrup, now they've also been hiding that vaccines will give you autism, right? And so this idea that just because a piece of it might be true doesn't mean the slippery slope is in effect, right? And everything is true. So now you've got the situation where you've got a place that is potentially has an opportunity to do some good because they're asking some tough questions, but they're also going to be doing some bad because, as every health professional and the health professionals we had on the show recently would tell you, this is not going to end well for people's health.
That's right.
Right. So a little bit of conspiracy might be true, doesn't mean the whole thing is, right? It doesn't have to become more and more vast. So anyway, go into the rule of thumb is go in knowing yourself, ask yourself those tough questions, recognize it, just keep a feeling, one hand on your heart and say, does this make me feel good when I'm watching the show about aliens? Does this make me feel good to hear a conspiracy theory about Donald Trump? Does this make me feel good to hear a conspiracy theory about a Hillary Clinton? And you're going to catch yourself every single time if you have a predisposition going. I can literally feel it. Like, oh God, let this be true, right? Right. So, and the last thing is also notice how many conspiracy theories do people advocate for and believe in that when they never come to fruition, there's never accountability for it.
Oh, have you ever seen anybody held accountable for a conspiracy theory?
No, and no one has ever accounted for the fact, you know what? I've been buying this crap for decades and none of it's been true. I'm going to start changing how I think about the world. It doesn't work that way, does it?
No.
It just means, my God, this conspiracy must be even bigger than I thought, right? Like they've controlled the data flow that would have unearthed this stuff. Now my God, they're in control of that, so you just keep digging deeper. So anyway, super interesting topic. I think that we can say for our final verdict for this one on, first of all, do you have to be a dopey person to believe a conspiracy theory? You absolutely do not. I think it's time to unbelieve, unlearn. It's time to unlearn the idea that only people that are uneducated or unintelligent believe conspiracy theories, because it also forces us to look in the mirror, all of us to look in the mirror and realize we can all fall victim to them. Yep. So anyway, that is going to kind of wrap up this episode. If you have questions, comments, you want to float a conspiracy theory about who is behind Melissa and I's show, who's subsidizing this show, and put us up to this, feel free to email us. And we do have our own email address, which if I recall is, oh God, it just popped it out of my head again, more or less to know @gmail.com, right?
More or less to know.
Or less to know @gmail.com. Send us your thoughts. We will never identify someone who doesn't want to be identified. But I swear to God, if you email me and tell me you're Bigfoot, I will find you. So anyway, we appreciate you listening. Melissa, you have your reminder.
Please make sure, if you have not already done so, hit subscribe. We would love to have you subscribe to the show. Make sure that you like the episode and leave us a comment below. And as always, share with a friend who maybe needs to think about conspiracy theories differently in their life too. So don't forget, hit that subscribe button.
Or a friend that you just want to think, period. And to have something to talk about.
There you go.
Have something to talk about. Did you hear what those two yahoos on the podcast said last week? Ridiculous. That gives you something to talk about. Thanks, everyone. We will see you. This is episode 9. Do we have a little celebration coming for episode 10? We'll have to figure that out.
I don't know what it is quite yet, but we'll have to think about that.
Do something metric, because it's 10.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah. All right. Melissa, thank you. Everyone, audience, thank you for listening. We will see you next time on Unlearning Out Loud.
See you, everybody.